Hey everybody, welcome back to the program. Today we are doing another episode of Versus. This is where I look at two versions of the same record pressed in different countries, examine the similarities and differences in order to decide which one I think is the better version. And today we are going to be tackling the Beatles' fifth studio album, Help, originally released in 1965. This is UK versus USA. Today's episode is brought to you by Manscaped. If you ever find yourself in a position like Paul did in the film, you better hope you're prepared, and Manscaped can help. They offer a wide range of grooming products to keep you looking and feeling your best. From invigorating body wash to aluminum-free deodorant, and of course their flagship trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. This thing will keep you as smooth as Paul with its skin-safe tech, a handy LED light, and a battery that lasts up to 90 minutes. It's even got a travel lock to prevent it from running out of battery in case it gets bumped in your travel bag when you have to flee to the Bahamas to escape a radical group that are trying to sacrifice your life. Right now, you can help support the channel and get 20% off plus free shipping with the code VinylRewind at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping. Just follow the link below and use the code VinylRewind at checkout. For their second feature film, the Beatles were asked to write a song bearing the same name as the film, just like how they had done for A Hard Day's Night. However, at the time of pre-production for this film, it was simply known as Beatles 2. Ringo suggested the title of Eight Arms to Hold You, which they tentatively used. Even Capitol Records promoted the title on their single of Ticket to Ride. However, it was realized that writing a song using that title would be difficult, so the director Richard Lester suggested the title of Help, but since that was already taken at the Writers Guild of America, they added the exclamation point at the end, and the rest is history. The cover photo was taken by Robert Freeman, who also shot the covers for their previous albums with The Beatles, A Hard Day's Night, and Beatles for Sale. His inspiration for the cover pose was from a candid photo he took of the Beatles while they were filming in Austria. The actual cover photo was taken back in London on a special stage built at Twickenham Studios. Initially, Robert wanted the band to spell help in semaphore letters, which is a form of nonverbal communication usually done with the use of flags. However, he didn't like the way the arms looked as a group, so they improvised different positions until they got the one they liked the best. By the time the covers were printed, the image of the Beatles was mirror flipped for some reason, and in the end the group spells NUJV on the UK cover and NVUJ on the Capitol release. Help was released on the 6th of August 1965, just a week after the film's UK premiere. In the US, the album came out on the 13th of August. Moving on to the packaging, I really like both covers. Starting with the UK version, I love how clean it looks. The Beatles posing against an all-white background is very artistic to me, and I agree with the photographer when he said that the text was not needed and lessened the impact of the image. Even with that said, I really do like the font chosen here for the Beatles and Help. It's very similar, however, the Beatles is slightly different, especially when you look at the serifs. Like overall, it's a bit elongated and squished, but what I really like is if you look at the A, the H, the T, the serif is a bit longer on the left side, and this gives it an overall sense of motion, which I really like. Like the Beatles is coming in like that. Overall, this helps to differentiate it from the film because, in essence, and we'll get to this in a little bit, it really is not the soundtrack. It is the soundtrack plus more. Moving to the US version here, it's a bit more. But this definitely takes cues from the film itself, the graphic design of the film, as well as movie posters of the time. However, this font here for Help is different than the one that's used in the film. It's just an interesting point. Overall, this feels very much like a soundtrack album of this time. Like I think it does that very well. One interesting thing, other than the Beatles in different positions, for some reason the Beatles are in black and white here. I'm not sure why they chose to do that, and honestly, until I started doing this video, I had never really noticed that before, so that's kind of funny. But I will say though, one advantage the US version has over the UK is the gatefold. And inside you get a bunch of great stills and promotional photography from the making of the film. You get this hilarious synopsis, and then you get a bit of the making of the film. And as it says, where does it say that? A very special movie soundtrack souvenir album. I think that really sums up this, because what I do is I imagine myself back in 1965. I just saw the film. I want to relive it. This is like a great companion piece to have, you know what I mean? Because once that film left the theaters, at that time, who knows when you're ever going to be able to see it again, because home movies weren't a thing. You could maybe find clips of it on film that you could have for a 16mm projector, but I really don't know how readily available that was for most people. I mean, this was about as good as you got. You know what I mean? So I think for that, it does very well, and I love that it's in black and white and in color, and the collage is very well laid out. I really like this as a thing. Like, you could frame that. I think that's pretty cool. All right, moving on to the back cover, we're going to start with the UK release here. Again, going with the simplicity, the starkness, the back cover very much carries that. I believe this is the first Beatles release to not have any liner notes on the back. And I think that adds a lot, because it's setting the tone for the albums that came after this, you know what I mean? It's like sort of breaking the mold a little bit when it comes to graphic design for music albums. I really like these portraits as well. I really get a sense of each Beatle from them, a sense of their personality, sort of like a quiet moment with each one. If they feel very natural, which I think adds a lot of artistic value to the back here. And what I find really interesting is that each of these photos is a slightly different cropping. No two photos are the same. And it just, I just find that that's such an interesting choice. All right, moving on to the back cover of the US version. Again, it feels very much like a movie poster, especially this feels like the bottom quarter of a traditional movie poster. This photo is fantastic. This down here, this advertisement, it sort of lessens the overall effect of this. It feels a little cheap to me. I would have rather just had this full color image go all the way down. That being said, this giving all these credits to people who worked on the film is, admirable. I think that's a good thing. However, it comes at the expense of the track listings, and they're really small and it's oddly spaced. And I get they were trying to keep it within this column of text. It just doesn't look very good. It's also odd that the instrumental numbers are not named, but they are named on the record labels. I assume that has something to do with, keeping this brief. It's a minor nitpick, but yeah, I don't love the back cover in terms of overall graphic design. And with all that said, this round goes to the UK version. All right, so the music for the album was recorded before, during, and after the filming of the movie. The UK soundtrack release places 7 new songs heard in the film on side 1, with side 2 featuring 7 newly recorded songs that were not in the film. Of the 14 tracks, 2 were covers, 10 were written by Lennon and McCartney, with the last 2 written by George. In the US, Capitol Records was able to release the official soundtrack album, unlike the Beatles' previous film, A Hard Day's Night. The US version differs in that it only contains the 7 songs heard in the film, so it's basically side 1 of the UK album in a slightly different order. To round out the rest of the US record, 5 tracks of the instrumental film score were inserted between the songs performed by the Beatles. Now, part of the reason Capitol did this was because 3 songs on the UK version of Help were already released on the Beatles' Capitol album Beatles 6. The remaining UK Help tracks were eventually released on Yesterday and Today and Rubber Soul. Now, another reason Capitol did this was because of money. It was very common in albums in America to only have 12 tracks, where it was common for UK records to have 14. And so if they chopped up Beatles albums, they could effectively sell more records by compiling the tracks they cut with non-album singles and songs from the EPs to make compilations such as Beatles 65, Beatles' second album, and Something New. And another reason could be, and this is speculation on my part, that since the previous soundtrack album followed a similar track listing with instrumentals interspersed with the Beatles songs, it could be that Capitol thought, hey, that's the way to do it, that's what Beatles fans are expecting, and they didn't want to mess with the formula. Now, overall, I think they did a good job with the running order of the US album, spacing out the instrumental tracks in between the Beatles songs. And if I think of it as a soundtrack, it really works. However, it doesn't make for a great Beatles album, if that makes sense. Like, it would have made more sense to me to follow the sequence they did for Yellow Submarine and, you know, put all the Beatles songs on one side with instrumentals on the other. But it is what it is. And, you know, so that being said, as a album, as a record that I want to put on and listen to, the UK version is the way to go. The only thing I don't like about the UK version, and this is a minor nitpick, is that it ends on Dizzy Miss Lizzie after the Beautiful Yesterday, and I think that's just a disservice. I would have switched those two songs around, but that's all I got. So yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that the UK version is the better album, but I still think the Capitol version is worth owning because it's more of a pure soundtrack experience since it contains those instrumental songs. It's also significant in the fact that it's one of the earliest uses of a sitar on a Western pop rock record, and it's technically the first use of one on a Beatles record. It beats out Rubber Soul. Now, if you're looking to pick up a copy of the UK version, the good news is that it was pretty much the standard release throughout the world, obviously except for North America. So it's pretty easy to find a copy where you live. That being said, I recommend picking up a copy in mono, but the stereo version isn't bad. It's just that, well, you know, the stereo mix doesn't really have the Beatles influence, and pretty much all of you already know this, but it was very common at the time. You know, stereo didn't sell that well. Kids weren't buying it, they were buying it in mono, so stereo was seen as an afterthought. It was really more for the record label, and primarily the Beatles weren't present for this mix. Now, as far as picking up a Capitol version, it sold extremely well back in 1965, and it was reissued a lot over the years, even up into 1988. So you shouldn't have too much trouble finding a copy, and they shouldn't be that expensive. As far as mono or stereo, it's a toss-up as Ticket to Ride is processed using fake stereo, and the mono version of Help is a fold down of this stereo mix and not the true mono version, which contains a different vocal take. Or, you know, you could be like me and just own all of them. I mean, who am I kidding? We're all Beatles fans. We have to have multiple copies of the same album. All right, everybody, that'll do it for today. Let me know which is your preferred version and why. Also, let me know if you're one of those that always associates the opening of James Bond with Help. I'm curious to know. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I'm your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side.